Hi, welcome to Community Kitchen Teachables, brought to you by Community Kitchen Programs of Calgary. My name is Anna, and I run a program here at Community Kitchen called Calgary's Cooking. In this session, we are going to answer some questions that I get asked a lot, questions that are related to cooking and kitchen. So the first question I get asked a lot is, what do I fill the pot with that I'm going to put on the stove? Do I fill it with hot water first, or do I fill it with cold water? And what difference does it make? The answer to it is I would always fill the pot with cold water and then bring it up to a boil. Now, the reason why you want to use cold water as opposed to hot water is hot water that comes straight out of the tap could carry things in the water such as minerals and lead from the pipes if you have older pipes in your house. So the reason why you want to use cold water is that when you use cold water, you're bringing that water up to temperature and through the process of boiling. And through that process of boiling, you will get rid of any contaminants. So again, just to clarify, use cold water when you're filling your pot and then bring it up to a boil. Do not use hot water. The next question that I get asked is, what is the difference between iodized salt, Himalayan salt, kosher salt, and sea salt, and where do I use them? Well, your most basic salt, of course, is the iodized salt. This would be your common table salt that you would be able to get at any grocery store. So all table salt is, it's salt that has been mined from a salt mine, and it has iodine added to it, so a mineral. And then some people do notice that table salt with iodine in it does tend to leave a little bit of a bitter aftertaste, either eating it right out of the container, like just tasting it, or in their finished product. It comes down to a preference. The other thing is that iodized table salt is a very fine grain. So it is a lot easier for it to get incorporated into a product. It does dissolve very quickly. Some people do prefer that. So again, it depends what your application is. If you're going to add it to water for pasta, I would definitely use the table salt. The next one is, of course, kosher salt. What is the deal with kosher salt? You can get kosher salt in varying grains of sizes. This one here, it says coarse. Some kosher salt can be a little bit finer. The difference with kosher salt in terms of when to use it, why you would use it, some people do feel that kosher salt has a bit more of a pure flavor because it doesn't have the iodine added to it. So the flavor is a little bit more pure, it's not bitter tasting. The granules for kosher salt are bigger than iodized table salt, so it doesn't always dissolve. Some people like to use it as a finishing salt. It is completely up to personal preference. A lot of people that are gonna get a steak ready on the barbecue, they will use a kosher salt. I myself use kosher salt most of the time at home, okay? The next one is Himalayan salt. Himalayan salt comes from Pakistan, and you can see that the color is usually pink. The difference between flavor is very minute. Some people feel that Himalayan is more natural tasting than iodized table salt. So kind of along the line of kosher salt in that respect. It doesn't leave an aftertaste. The thing with Himalayan salt is you usually have to use a salt grinder to use it. These crystals in here are too big just to sprinkle on something because you'd be biting into a really large piece of salt, which wouldn't always be appetizing. It's very pretty in color. It can be used as a finishing salt. The other thing that's interesting about Himalayan salt is that a lot of people are using Himalayan for baked product or baking, but again, you'd want to get a salt grinder to use it. The final salt is sea salt. So sea salt is essentially evaporated seawater. okay? And what is left is the actual sea salt. Some people believe that it is healthier for you because it's more natural. Again, it comes down to a personal preference, where you would use it. Some people like to use it as a finishing salt. Some people, again, if you're grilling steak or grilling chicken, a lot of people do like to use sea salt. Some people can really taste, if you have a really sensitive palate, can actually feel or sense the taste of the sea from sea salt. It does have a little bit of a different flavor from the Himalayan. It's a little bit stronger flavor from both the Himalayan and the kosher. Again, it comes down to a personal preference. The next thing is when you are using eggs. Do you use room temperature eggs? Can you use eggs straight from the refrigerator? Does it make a difference? It depends on what your application is, what you're wanting to do with the eggs. When it comes to baking, you always want to use room temperature eggs. So a really quick way to, if you forget to pull them out of the fridge and you're like, oh, I need room temperature eggs, but I'm ready to go with my baking, what you can do is you can take your eggs, put them in a bowl like this, and you can run hot water over the egg, not boiling hot, but definitely warmer than room temperature. And what that will do is it will warm the egg up. Now, why do you want room temperature eggs? Well, for the purpose of baking, the reason why your eggs should be at room temperature is that it will, number one, make blending of ingredients a lot easier. And you avoid the risk of overworking your batter, whatever the batter happens to be. The other thing too is that if you overwork your batter or if you have trouble blending your ingredients, what that could result in is a finished baked product that would have a weird uneven texture. Your product could end up being a lot heavier than it would normally, or maybe you don't get as much of a product, so you get less volume. So it's really important to have your eggs at room temperature. Some people like to have their eggs at room temperature when they're making scrambled eggs. Some people, it doesn't matter. So when it comes to other applications such as scrambled eggs or anything like that, you don't necessarily have to have them at room temperature, but if you do, that's okay as well. The next thing is how to avoid crying when you're chopping onions. I get asked this a lot, and I do have a lot of people when I'm working with groups when I'm working with the cooking groups, they will flat out refuse to cut onions. So there are a couple of tips and tricks that you can do. For starters, the very easiest and simplest thing to avoid crying is make sure that when you are cutting your onions, you have a really sharp knife. The sharper your knife cutting through the onion, the less tearing of the onion and the less of the gas that comes out of the onion. The less gas, the less crying. So start off with a really, really sharp knife. The other thing that you can do is you can chill your onions before you cut them. And when I say chill, you can stick them in the refrigerator for about 10-15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Or if you're really brave, you can stick them in the freezer for about 10 minutes. And again, when you start with a cold onion, there's less opportunity for the gas from the onion to get released, less gas, less crying. The other thing that you can do is, of course, some people do swear by the onion goggles. You can get the onion goggles in a lot of specialty cooking stores. I have tried it myself. I'm a little on the fence about whether they work or not. Some people swear by it, other people not so much. It's completely up to you. Okay. The other thing that you can do is you can use a food processor. So if you are cutting up a lot of onions, so for example, maybe you're going to be making a French onion soup, or you're going to be making a vegetable soup that does call for a lot of onion. If you have a food processor or a food chopper at home, you can stick your onion in that as well, and that will make quick work and again, avoid the whole crying. The older the onion, the stronger the onion. And the stronger the onion, the more opportunity it is for you to tear up. And then the last question is, do you salt your Do you add salt or oil to water when you are cooking pasta? Yes and no. So when you are going to be cooking your pasta, what you want to make sure that you're doing, number one, is use cold water, fill up your pot, put it on the stove. Don't add the salt to the water until the water just comes to a boil. Then add your salt, then add your pasta to it, okay? A lot of people will add oil to water because they're going to be making pasta. Some people prefer it. That's fine. That's completely up to you. But the one thing that I would also remind you of is when you add oil to your water for your pasta, your sauce that you're going to add to your pasta won't stick to your pasta. Okay, so you'll end up putting more sauce onto your pasta at the end. Some people that's fine with, some people rather not do that, okay? So it's completely up to you what you want to do. Again, when you are boiling water for pasta, bring your water up to a boil, add your salt to it, then add your pasta. The other thing to do as well to help prevent your pasta from sticking is make sure that you stir your pasta after you've added it to your boiling water. Then strain it once it's cooked. If you want to add oil to it then, you certainly can, but just keep in mind that your sauce won't stick to your pasta. And that concludes this session of common cooking questions. Thank you very much for your time and have yourself a great day.